Hey everyone, and welcome back to the My Pets Wellness Weekly Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Rebekah, and this week we have joining us Dr. Rodney. So Dr. Rodney, thanks so much for being here with us.
Glad to be here. I'm always glad to be here. I enjoy these things.
Perfect. So this month we're going to be focusing on the topic of self-care. So this week specifically, we're going to be chatting about decision fatigue and the importance of creating habits and making routines. So Dr. Rodney, my first question for you is, what is decision fatigue? And do you think that individuals who are in medical fields are at higher risk for that?
Well, we all have to make decisions every day, don't we? In certain occupations, you are required to make more decisions than normal people do in everyday life. We're all different in the number of decisions that we have to make. When we have just a few decisions to make, or it's not very fast in the decision-making process, you can usually manage it by the use of our routines and habits, because we operate based upon routines of behavior and habits. The serotonin in our brain, one of the things that chemical does is provide us with enough obsessiveness and compulsiveness in order to form those routines of behaviors. That's not a bad thing. It only becomes a problem when the behavior that's obsessive compulsive becomes a disorder. The obsessive compulsive behavior starts out as just simply a habit or routine of behavior. As you have to start making more and more and more decisions, you start getting fatigued at making those decisions, even though you know the routine of behavior. So then you might start taking shortcuts or skipping steps, and that's where the fatigue sets in. And then you could either become mentally fatigued in decision making. You could also become physically fatigued. So that's what you have to watch for when you start noticing that your mind and your body is reacting to the number of decisions you're making every day.
So it sounds like almost you're saying the more decisions you have to make on a daily basis, the greater risk you're at having this kind of mental fatigue, making worse decisions, and then also having an element of physical fatigue too.
Let me clarify one thing though. It's not only the number, it can also mean the degree of decision making. I mean, some decisions you can make all the time, every day. They're simple decisions, which requires a simple routine of behavior. The more complex or difficult the decision is, you will still have a routine of behavior on how you make that decision. You learned it. So either it's the number of times you have to make a decision or the degree of difficulty in making the decision.
The complexity.
The complexity.
Gotcha. What kinds of effects can occur in an individual's personal life or in their professional life as a result of decision fatigue?
Well, the decision fatigue leads to stress, and stress impacts us in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
But also because that decision fatigue that is taking place, maybe by the stress that it's creating, your mind no longer functions in a sharp way and your body begins to break down. And so you're going to find yourself being tired, lethargic, you want to sleep more. And all of that interferes with our effectiveness at work and at home. So maybe you kept going all day at work, making all these decisions, and then you get home and it's just like, I can't make another decision. Then I walk in the house and my wife says, "What do you want to eat?" "I don't care. Fix me anything." "Well, don't you have an opinion?" "I don't want to make another decision today." That conversation has happened many, many times.
Yeah.
And so the spouse has to realize, okay, they're in decision fatigue. So they've got to make the decision for you. And then I just lay down on the couch and so
Absolutely.
that's what happens. Yeah.
So I've been in that exact same situation after a busy day at work. You wake up, you make yourself breakfast, which you have to choose. You decide on the turns that you're going to take to work. You get into work as a vet or as a vet tech, and you are immediately bombarded with decisions that you are making all day, every day, some of those very complex decisions. So the number is high and the complexity is high. So I think it's good to be aware of this effect of decision fatigue so that you can communicate with your spouse or with your family or, someone that you're talking to, a friend that evening, that once you get home from work, you may be experiencing decision fatigue and might not be able to contribute to the decision-making processes if you've had a particularly long day, or in vet med, if you've had a day. So I know in medicine, I feel like it's really common to have often, 10-hour days. Sometimes if, you're in a residency or in an internship, those can be 12, 14-hour days. Do you feel like having all of those decisions that are frequent and complex impacts the quality of medicine for those individuals as they kind of reach those later hours of their shift.
I would hope it wouldn't, but in fact, it oftentimes does. Because when you have these complex decisions you're making, and there's a lot of them, as I said, that fatigue that you're feeling, you might start skipping some steps that you've learned in your routine of behavior. And hopefully most of the time that wouldn't have a drastic impact. But, like if you're skipping a part of the step of giving a shot, it's probably not going to be that big a deal. But if you're doing surgery on a pet and you skip something, it could be an entirely different consequence.
Absolutely. So could you talk a little bit about how building habits is actually a really important way to combat decision fatigue or to hopefully prevent some aspects of it?
Yeah, I can. I'm going to give you an illustration. Okay.
Perfect.
So our brain works on developing these patterns of behavior. In our brain, we have billions, if not even now they're saying trillions of individual neuron cells. None of them connect. They communicate to each other when I'm faced with some routine of behavior I have to develop. So here's how it works. And this morning, I had to think of an example. And hang in here with me because most of you will recognize this. Back in 1969, that's a long time ago in a galaxy far away, I was in driver's ed in high school. I had to learn how to drive. Somebody taught you how to drive, didn't they? You didn't just get in and take off.
Someone taught me. Yep.
Yeah, and so it's a class. My parents didn't want to try to teach me how to drive. So I had a teacher.
Do you want me to hold this for you?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
They taught me a routine of behavior. Okay? When they teach me the routine of behavior, my neurons connect. Now, in this neuroplasticity of the routine of behavior, there could be thousands and 100,000, even 1 million neurons connected in that one routine behavior, depending upon how complex it is. So if you're giving a shot, the routine of behavior is not as complex as doing surgery. Get that?
Right.
Okay. So here's how it works. I'm taught this. I remember it. Okay? In driver's ed, I was taught this. Step one is as you approach the car, you walk around the car and check the tires to make sure they're not inflated.
Yep.
Next thing is when you open the door, you sit in the driver's seat. I could put that as a step. Let's just go there. Gotta sit. Now you have to adjust the seat because maybe the person that was in the car before you is shorter or taller than you.
Right.
Now that I've adjusted the seat, I've got to check the mirrors because I have to check the middle mirror to make sure I can see behind me. And I have to be able to check the side mirrors to make sure I can see properly all the situations around me.
Right.
So that's the first 3 steps. The next step is I will put my foot on the brake. Because if you don't, you start the car and if something's in gear, you're in trouble.
Right.
After I put my foot on the brake, I'm going to turn the key. I'm going to keep my foot on the brake as I put it in drive. Now I do another check all around me. I turn around, look behind me. Then I put it in drive and I take off.
All right.
Okay? So he taught me that once. When I taught that, now this is a simplified version of it, but this is how it works. So these neurons connect, forming this routine of behavior. Well, I heard it the first time. I had a pretty good hand. It's not too complex.
Right.
But every time now I go to driver's ed, I repeat the behavior. Every time I repeat the behavior, the routine, the habit becomes stronger and stronger. Because I need to pass the class in order to go to the driver's department or the motor vehicle department and get a license. That's my goal. Okay? So I keep repeating the routine of behavior. If I skip a routine of behavior, Al Smith's going to yell at me. Okay? That's my driver's ed teacher. I still remember this guy.
Clearly made an impact on you.
I did. He taught me how to drive.
Yeah. That's great.
So as I repeat now it's easier to access the routine of behavior because encoded in each one of these neurons connected in this neuroplasticity in my brain is the memory of the event. So that the next time I go to get into a car, my memory of how to drive a car kicks in and I repeat the pattern of behavior. Eventually, I don't even have to think about it. I just do it.
That's true.
I pass the class. I go and I learn how to drive. I go pass the class. I take my driver's permit. I go and take the test. I had to develop a neuroplasticity upon the information I had to learn to pass the test, but I get my driver's license and I'm on my way.
Right.
Now I can remember that initially I kept repeating the same pattern of behavior. Now going back to what you said, then I start skipping some of it.
Right.
I figure out I don't always have to look at the tires or something else like that. And that's our laziness. Does it marginally put me at risk? Yeah. Did I always look behind me? Not always. Nothing ever happened. But that's why you're saying that when, in a sense, that becomes my decision fatigue, because I figure out a way I can just skip ahead. But when you skip the steps, it puts you or somebody else at risk. So that's how it works. The neuroplasticity forms a routine of behavior, and we have memory of the event. We have all these kind of routines of behavior. You know how to brush your teeth. You have a routine of behavior when you go to bed, when you get up. You have a routine of behavior about how you put on your clothes. I mean, which clothes you put on at a certain time, where all might be different. But once that routine of behavior is formed and it gets really strong, I don't have to think about how to put on my clothes. I just do it.
Right. And I totally agree. When I was first starting driver's ed, every single one of those steps was kind of challenging. Like, okay, all right, what comes next? I need to remember to, check my mirrors. I need to remember to do all of these, walking around, looking at the tires. But you're totally right. After, strengthening, I would assume, those neural connections and doing it enough times, it became kind of like second nature. So I'd imagine in that situation, you're really removing a lot of those very kind of small micro decisions and forming a bigger habit as a result. So I could see that applying to a lot of different areas in life besides just, driving a car. So like if you have habits that you're doing every single morning for your, morning habits, you wake up, you brush your teeth, you make yourself breakfast, you make yourself coffee, you go to work. All of that, it sounds like, are forming those neural connections and strengthening those neural connections and hopefully reducing the decision fatigue that you'd be feeling at the end of the day.
It does, because you just do it.
Right.
You have a memory of the routine. You don't have to think about each step. You just do it.
Gotcha.
That reduces the memory fatigue. Now, obviously, again, the complexity of the routine of behavior might require some attention more than a simple act. But our whole life is based upon these routine of behaviors. We survive a complicated world every day where we have to make decisions, because once we make the first decision, we develop this. And the next time we're faced with the same thing, like putting on my clothes or brushing my teeth or fixing a meal, I go back and reinforce it. And it just gets easier and easier and easier. But even if it gets easy, over time, if a doctor, a vet, is making complicated decisions all day and they're very busy, they're going to start skipping some of this stuff. And that's where the level of the medicine provided for the pet and the client could be at risk.
So it sounds like where we can, it's important to make routines and habits in our daily life so that we can then make those more complex or more numerous decisions in a medical practice.
Right.
So for example, like exercise, I know can be so hard to kind of do as a routine, but it sounds like once you start, if you are consistent with it, then it's pretty actually straightforward to actually strengthen those neural connections and have that be something, well, no matter how work was, I get home, I go and exercise. Yeah. You just have to kind of start that.
That's the way it works, because if you don't have a routine of behavior, you won't do it. You know that.
Right.
So now again, every time you repeat it, the connection gets stronger. Got that?
So do you think then in forming habits that it's helpful to have that initial kind of stimulus that, for example, when you are driving a car, you look and you say, okay, I'm going to start with doing my tires. And then from there, it's kind of a chain reaction. You kind of already have a habit of knowing exactly what you're supposed to do next. Similarly, do you think that there are these kinds of visual triggers that people can use? Like, I get home and I have my workout clothes out. They're ready to go. They are there. So in your brain, that process has already started. You go put those workout clothes on. You've already started that habit that you've been forming. So it's important to kind of have
in your example, putting out your clothes so that when you come home you see it could be a triggering event that activates, okay, I see that my clothes are out. I guess I'm going to start driving to the gym and go to the gym and putting on my clothes, blah, blah. So then that will enact it so that you could be more effective in following that routine.
Great. Awesome. How long do you think it takes to actually form a habit?
Okay. Excellent question. Actually, the first time you do it, you start forming it. but it's not
Interesting.
strong enough to be a natural response.
Gotcha.
Okay. So when I learned how to add, multiply, and divide, I could look at the flashcards once and I connect with it.
Right.
But I got to keep repeating it until it becomes second nature. So every person might be different on how long it takes.
Gotcha.
Actually, from the first moment I looked at the flashcards, I had the neural pathway connected that 2 + 2 = 4. Okay. The more I do it, the stronger it gets and the more automatic it. So you have to keep doing the routine behavior. And again, obviously, the more complex the decision or the process is, the more you have to repeat it repeatedly before it becomes a natural part of what you do.
Gotcha.
When the decision fatigue kicks in, I start skipping steps because I'm tired mentally and physically, and then you have those consequences.
That makes total sense. What would you recommend to someone who's wanting to start a habit or even stop, a habit, and doesn't quite know where to start? Okay. How do you start the process of kind of forming these neural connections if you're wanting to start a habit or potentially stop?
It's a good question. Essentially, I would say this. When you have a first-time event where you have to make a decision, if you've never made that decision before, you're forced to start somewhere. You might not know where to start. In my example, I had a man teaching me the steps.
Right.
If I had no person teaching me the drive, I'd have to make it up. And it's going to probably be a wrong routine of behavior. I'm still going to do it the same way I started doing it the first time until I find out that it doesn't work. So we'll just start it naturally. Once I start that routine of behavior, when I approach the car, I know what to do. Follow that? Now, so what happens if this routine of behavior doesn't work well? You'll still do it until you discover it's not the right routine of behavior. You might make up something else, or you might ask somebody, I have this routine of behavior, how can I change it? Or maybe the routine of behavior has to change. So this is how it works. This neural pathway is there. You have a memory of the event. It will never go away. I had not thought about this since probably 1969. That's a long time ago in a galaxy far away. 3 years.
Wow.
This morning.
Yep.
Got it?
Right back.
I didn't forget it.
Yep.
I haven't done it that way since 1969. Have you? Now, so either now, or maybe I find out this wrong. But now follow this.
Right.
So now I have a different routine of behavior that I've developed because some of this is irrelevant. So now when I approach my car, I don't start by walking around the car and checking the tires. I don't need to.
Right.
Because my car, when I get into it, has
a little sensor.
The tires. It tells, I don't have to walk around the car and look at it.
Yep.
That's out.
It's a good feeling.
I get into the car and I need to check the seats. No, I don't. I'm the only one that drives my car. Now, if I drive my wife's car, I got to adjust the seats.
Right.
Now, do I have to look at the mirrors and adjust them? No. So now I'm not skipping steps.
Right.
I just get in the car. My seat's adjusted. My mirrors are changed. Okay. I mean, they're already there. I will put my foot on the brake. I will not turn the key because now I have a button. I'll push the button.
Yep.
I'll put it in drive. I should look around me. Maybe I don't. And then I go. Got it?
Yeah.
Now, it's actually a different thing. Okay? When I first start doing it that way, because I have more resources to skip some of these steps, and it's legitimate. I don't need to adjust the seat if nobody's been in there.
Absolutely.
This forms a new pattern of behavior. Every time I do the new pattern of behavior, which I actually started doing, not in that same way, but it changed over the years, of course.
Of course,
This is actually a new pattern of behavior because I can't change this pattern of behavior. It's a routine that my brain remembers. So I'm actually developing a new pattern of behavior.
Okay.
Every time I do the new pattern of behavior, because it's the right pattern of behavior now, or something has changed, or maybe I found out that this was screwed up in some way. Okay? Maybe I didn't have any tires. No, it won't. Okay. This becomes stronger. Okay? As that becomes stronger, I can't erase this, but this dark routine of behavior actually weakens. Okay? See what I'm doing here?
Mm-hmm.
It never forgets the pattern altogether. I just proved that. I found that pattern behavior in my brain, and I haven't used it since 1969.
Right.
I access that. It's very weak because this is now my strong pattern of behavior.
Like riding a bike.
Like riding a bike. Now, if you're a doctor and you had a routine of behavior that you were using, and maybe you didn't listen carefully in class or something, and you find out you're making mistakes, you can't just adjust this one.
Right.
You think that that's what you're doing, but that's still there. You still knew how you used to do it when you left a step out in the surgical procedure. So you actually have to develop a whole new one.
Gotcha.
So if you found that this is a bad routine of behavior, do you have any bad habits that are routines of behavior? Do you have any things that don't work well? Then you're forced to film no new pattern of behavior. You think you're adjusting the old one, but you're not, because the old one's still there. You know exactly what it is. But the more you do the new one, which is the good habit, your bad habits weaken. And the stronger this gets, the weaker this gets, because I'm no longer repeating this pattern of behavior. You get that? So if I have a bad habit, a bad routine that's ineffective, I have to develop a new routine. Again, you're going to think you're adjusting this one. You're not actually. If you were adjusting this one, this would vanish. It's still there. I'm actually developing a new routine. It might be based on this. I mean, I got in the car here. I put my foot on the brake here. I turned the car on here. It's related, but it's actually a new routine of behavior.
Gotcha.
So if I have a bad habit, a bad routine of behavior, an ineffective one, I have to develop a new one. It might be related to this. As I strengthen this, this weakens, and the bad habit goes away. Now, if you have a bad day,
Never.
maybe the doctor is extremely stressed. You might not skip one of these steps. You might actually access this and revert back to the old way because it's still there. And then you're going to make a mistake. But you're probably going to instantly recognize, whoops, I did this again, and you'll go back to this. So that's how it works.
That's super interesting.
Yeah.
And it sounds like if you're wanting to start a new behavior, it's good to be intentional about it.
Yes.
It's good if you have someone who's proficient in that behavior, like your driver and teacher, to get their input and their resources first, so you make sure that you're forming the habit that you're actually wanting to develop and to strengthen. And then it sounds like start somewhere. You got to start somewhere and start strengthening that. So.
I would say it's best when you start a routine behavior to ask somebody for help that knows what the correct routine of behavior is.
Yeah.
If you're in a spot and you don't have somebody to ask, you got to invent it.
Yep.
And then when you find out that something's wrong, you're going to have a new one, and you probably should ask somebody to do it. It starts with the need to make a decision. And I either know how to make a decision, whether it's good or bad, or I don't. If I don't know how to make the decision, I have to invent it.
Gotcha.
Okay?
Well, that is super helpful and very enlightening, I think, for all the doctors out there that, I feel like we have all experienced decision fatigue. So I think this has been super helpful. So thank you so much for going through all of this.
I enjoy it.
And thank you for y'all at home who joined in with us today. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and we're also on Spotify. So check us out there. Feel free to comment, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Bye.